Good evening, everyone. Thanks for coming. My name is Russ Lazovic. I am proud to be the principal here at Ridge. If we haven't met yet, I look forward to meeting you all in the future as your children age up to Ridge. Very proud of our school and being part of this district. So thank you all for coming out. We have been working for about 9 months now across the district and in partnership with the township, with our police department and a number of the health offices in Basking Ridge, what we are calling Restoring Focus. So we have been doing a lot of research, going to other schools. We have our website up where everything is documented, so if you're just coming to the conversation or you're looking for more, that's where you find your resources. I'm happy to introduce tonight, we've done a lot of work with our older kids, and to have our 4 principals at the elementary level represented today by Ms. Foley, who will be up here in a second, working hard though, because this is where we really wanted to target. You are all benefiting from our mistakes, and hopefully you have the foresight to make different decisions than we did. I wish I could go back. My children, I have one who's a freshman in college, and the other one is a sophomore in high school, and they are 100% addicted to their phones. And that's growing up with a dad who was already against phones and didn't really understand when we handed them a phone initially what we were handing them. And thankfully we've learned so much more, and we want to make sure that you're making informed decisions, and so you can always feel comfortable with whatever decision it is you choose to make, that it was an informed one. And that's kind of our job here as the school, is to have these conversations, to get information out, to hear from you. Currently in the district, if you go to any of our schools, K-8, so the existing policy is that there are no cell phones in school. Is that 100% perfect all the time? Probably not. If I asked Ms. Hudak, she'd probably tell me no. She is the middle school principal. Here at the high school, though, it was initially, going back pre-COVID, that cell phones were not allowed here as well, but when the district changed its technology policy, phones just kind of walked in. And we have seen the crazy effects of what has happened since, and so here at the high school, as the only building in district that currently allows phones, we are now practicing through the month of February this idea of phone-free. And so tomorrow actually is our first practice phone-free day. An announcement will be made at 8:20, which is when school starts here, to remind everyone to turn their phones off and put them away. And if they're seen, they will be taken. But our idea was a number of schools in the state, a ton of schools across the country at the high school level, have been going phone-free because of the impact that they see to students in general, not just during the school day, but it's what we can control, but to give them an environment where they're focused on being here, focused on each other, focused on their studies. The schools that have done this in front of us have seen tremendous positive results. And my favorite part, all the quotes from the students in those schools, it takes 2 to 3 months, they say, before the effects actually set in. But the students against themselves, so angry with themselves, admitting that they feel better, that they feel more focused, that they feel more confident in school. And so we're looking to do that as well. Our current approach was to be the least restrictive as possible, which is rather than take away, which most schools do, they either have their kids put those phones into these yonder bags, which are closed by magnets and you can't get open unless you have the special magnetic opener or a chainsaw. Or they've installed literally what they call phone lockers, which against the walls instead of banks of lockers like we used to use for our books and coats and things like that. They're smaller, and then they have to check in their phones with a staff member every day. We have chosen to practice these pilot off and away, which is what the middle school does, hoping that we can instill in the students the habit and the skill set to know there may be times when I'm better off without my phone, especially for an extended period of time, and I know how to turn it off and put it away. So we're hopeful that they feel the difference, that they practice making the choices. We recognize that all of us, at least here I speak for us at the high school, we're all addicted, myself included. You know, the phones are just there everywhere and they're wonderful tools. But what I do talk to our students about is the people who built them shamelessly plug the fact that they built them to be addictive, because they make money as long as we're on their phone. And so they have no problem telling us that. There have been documentaries going back to 2012 about how they were built to accomplish this, and guess what? Yay, we're very smart as a species, and we accomplished what we set out to accomplish. We built these wonderful tools that are also addictive. And I keep saying to kids, you want to control your phone, not have it the other way around. And so we're going to try off and away. The Board of Education, Superintendent have been incredibly supportive of this. There are many who would prefer take rather than teach, but we're going with teach, not take. we will see how it goes, but we have great kids here. We've got a great community, and I think if we keep talking about it and keep practicing together, we're going to get to a much better place than some of the districts that are running around trying to take phones away. So that's at the high school. For most of you, I believe you probably have elementary school students, since that was the focus of tonight. You got them ahead of time. There are all sorts of books. Check out our website for tons of resources, but the idea of how to build a healthy relationship with this type of technology, and you're in a perfect spot to, as I said, benefit from the information, the research, and those of us admitting we made mistakes, I wish I could go back. You don't have to worry about that. And you could actually send us students who don't mind being phone-free at the high school all day because they've learned to live with phones differently than our current kids. And so we're happy to be presenting all of you with this information. This evening's presentation is being recorded. We know lots of people cannot come, so we will add it to our Restoring Focus website as yet another resource for people. But we really appreciate you all taking the time to at least come out and listen. As I said to the students, listening's the key part. We don't always necessarily agree at the end of the day, but we need to hear each other out. And so hopefully you'll get a lot of great information. I've seen our presenter 1.5 times at this point, and I'm still learning things from her, so I'm excited about this evening, and I hope you are too. And with that, I'm going to turn it over to Ms. Foley, president of Oak Street School.
Thank you. Thanks, Dr. Lasovic. So I represent as the empty nester principal, the one that doesn't have to watch their kids at home tonight. Mine are 30. I actually even missed giving my kids didn't have cell phones at the critical time because they're too old. So I actually have a ton of empathy for all of you and what you're going through. Notice all the school colors are up there. Colin, who is a magical person who makes this whole place run, asked me what colors. I'm like, all the school colors. So you might see folks from every elementary school. We're really united in trying to help this effort across the district in getting you and our students all situated to be in a better position than they have been. So to do this, we have an amazing resource right here in our own hometown. Dr. Sinha has a student at Oak Street, and she has helped us by, this same presentation was done in a morning in December, back in the fall. We tried a morning presentation, but then the people that did see it were really encouraged and compelled by it, but realized that it probably wasn't the best timing. So we planned this, an evening opportunity for you and a recording opportunity so that we can get the word out more. She actually also just spoke to, I'm gonna say 400 teachers on Wednesday when your students had a half day. We were all gathering, and the teachers, I know we have a teacher here that came back after listening to her presentation, and more teachers too. Again, very compelling, she's very understandable, and she will be giving you a lot of really good information that will convince you. I'm sure you're already convinced that you'd love to foster this good relationship with the phone, but she'll give you all the science behind it and just her own real lived experience. If you were interested in some of the tools that you might need to do some of this managing of the device on behalf of your child, and as we learn, it's not just phones, right? It's tablets and all the other lovely gadgets that they have. There is another presentation that was done as part of the tech series, and that is on the website that Dr. Lasovic mentioned, and I will repost that in my Friday folder and encourage the other principals to as well. So that is a very technical presentation with all the apps and tools and how to manage the part. So I didn't want you to think that Dr. Sinha was going to give that to you this evening, but that is available to you. But trust me, at the end of this proximate hour, maybe a little less, you will feel very, way smarter. I listened to her, I'm like, I'm smarter now because I know more, and it is very compelling. So with no further ado, Dr. Sinha.
Thank you very much for the introduction, and thank you for the opportunity to share a lot of what I do kind of on the day-to-day, and to be able to share it with my community it's very rewarding for me. So I just wanted to talk about a little overview. I'll talk a little bit about myself, some observations from my clinical practice, things I see on the day-to-day. And then we'll get into a little bit, I'm not going to nerd out too much, but a little bit about brain development, and talk about an analogy that we can use to understand how screens can affect brain development, and then finally, things that we can do about it, things that won't feel very challenging, things that we feel like we can do today, you know? So I'm a child neurologist, I work at Summit Health. I've been at Rutgers for my whole life, college, medical school, graduate school, residency, fellowship, been in Jersey for a very long time. My husband and I moved to Basking Ridge in 2021, and our daughter Grace, she's 6 now, she started kindergarten at Oak Street just this past fall. Wanted to talk about why this is so important to me, so that's Grace and Jackson. I think like most of you, I had an epiphany watching our kids grow up. My mother had, she was traveling, she had bought my kids a toy phone, you know, the kind that, it's not really a phone, it's like filled with water and there's like little things, you push the button and I saw one day Grace was playing with that device, and instead of playing with it the way she should have, she was like scrolling. There's nothing to scroll. Why are you doing that? And I just saw it happen, and like everything sort of flashed before my eyes, like, oh, hold on, something is not okay here. So it's just been something, it's an observation that I've made, but I think we've all had these little epiphanies. So I'll come back to that. I want to talk about a little bit what I see on the day-to-day. Common reasons for seeing me in the office. Multiple times a week I see cases like this. 3-year-old twins that are in preschool, not yet speaking verbally or communicating, very aloof, not interacting with their peers. A 6-year-old boy with a lot of emotional impulsivity, uncontrollable behaviors, a lot of tantrums, meltdowns. 7-year-old girl, for example, struggling with focus, hard to stay on task, behind grade level for reading. 10-year-old girl with, you know, headaches every day, not responding to medication and feeling very depressed. Those are the kinds of cases I see. The most common diagnoses that I see are developmental delays, motor, social delays. I do evaluations for autism and evaluate children with autistic traits. Learning disabilities. I see a lot of patients with ADHD struggling with focus, hyperactivity, impulsivity, anxiety, OCD, headaches, seizures. So as I go through, you know, I meet the families, we talk, you know, I kind of go through my possible explanations as to what could be happening. So maybe those twins are possibly on the autism spectrum, maybe there's some ADHD or dyslexia as a reading disability, migraines, depression. And as I go through the evaluation, you know, I get a sense of what parents have observed, what teachers have observed, get a little more history on what's been going on in the classroom, you know, how is school going? And then inevitably I ask about devices, and I have been getting this history that it's many, many hours a day on weekdays, even more on weekends, but 3+ hours a day. And I was kind of looking back at my charts, and that number kept coming up. And it didn't sit right. Is this something that makes me change my assessment, my recommendations? How can I use that to help my families? In order to do that, you know, I have to kind of go back and try to understand how the brain has developed, how our kids are experiencing their day-to-day at their young ages. So kind of an overview of the developing brain from birth through adulthood, and you'll see that first year, rapid exponential growth. And I mean, for all of us have seen our kids in that first year of life, it's like a whole new person every month. So much growth. And then up to age 5, the brain has reached adult size, but it continues to finesse and evolve and mature well into the mid-20s. Put a box around this because that is elementary school. That's what we're housing in all of these schools that our kids go to. So it's a very critical period. How does the brain grow and develop? It's a process of pruning and rewiring. This is an image of an MRI, and what you're seeing is the distinction between white matter and gray matter. You know, the white looks whiter, the gray looks gray. The gray matter is like the nodes, where the little computer processors where all the information is being consolidated, manipulated. And the white matter, think of it as highways that connect all those nodes together. So the key thing to understand about brain development is that it's in an experience-dependent manner. So what does that mean? As we experience new things, new connections are made between the gray and white matter, and unused ones are lost. And with repeated exposure, those connections are made permanent. It's kind of the neurological basis for practice makes perfect, right? This is actually from the Center of the Developing Child at Harvard, where it shows plasticity, which is the term we use for the adaptability of the brain and how rapidly or how high it is at early ages, and then how it kind of declines with age. And the green line here shows the cost, physiological cost, but the cost required over time to modify and change those connections. So it's another way to say that this is a critical period from birth to age 10, where a lot of rapid growth is happening, and so it's important to appreciate that, right? So I wanted to talk about how to understand screens and the developing brain. Brain has a lot of functions, processing visual information, language, thinking, emotional, regulation, memory. I wanted to pose a little model to you to kind of split the brain into two working sections. So there's the brainstem at the bottom and then the cortex above. Think of the brainstem as the filter. It filters all sensory information, and it is like below the level of consciousness. We are not all consciously doing this. We are subconsciously doing this. It's the gatekeeper for all the data that gets in, and it's also where we house our automatic responses or our reflexive responses. You think of animal instinct, think of the fight or flight responses, fight or flight response. And then you think of the cortex, which regulates the brainstem's processes. Over time, it refines the capability of that filter. Over time, as we mature and we develop, the size of the pores in that filter gets smaller and smaller. And once that information gets in and into the cortex, there's a really beautiful and awesome process of putting that information together and then just being a person. You know, sensory processing, reactivity, language, communication, creativity, executive function. And here we are in 2025, having this conversation where there's a lot of distraction and fractured attention and devices that have been introduced at a very early age, right? So screen time, the way I think about it is more of a passive consumption of information. They're not actively processing it. And another analogy to use is like an IV medication where it goes straight into your bloodstream versus an oral medication where it has to go through a series of processing before it takes effect. So when we're looking at the screens and scrolling and watching videos, it's just going straight in, right? Much like you had mentioned, this is designed to keep your attention. The content is short, it's fast, it's very salient, and it's endless. There's video algorithms that predict what we like, and it is endless. There's no end. Like, you know, Instagram doesn't have an end at which you can say, I'm done now. And I was listening to a podcast interview of the developer who invented Endless Scroll, and he is now one of the co-founders of the Center for Humane Technology, and just lives in regret about this. But to your point, he admits, you know, we studied this, we used the human psychology kind of and took it to our advantage. There is a human need to want to complete something. So you scroll, 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 you get to the bottom, and what happens? So it's designed this way. So What I want you guys to consider is that what screen time does is it shunts us a little bit more to brainstem mode, where there's a wide open filter and everything comes in. And it shuts us a little bit away from cortex mode, where the cortex is regulating the filter, so it's like an unchecked filter. When the cortex regulates that filter, you're able to focus. So we can zoom in, we can get rid of what's irrelevant, focus on the task at hand, make decisions, regulate ourselves, and be creative. I want you to recall how we were talking about brain development being something that occurs in an experience-dependent manner. Practice makes perfect, or in neurology we say practice makes permanent. So if we shunt a child's brain to brainstem mode, then brainstem mode becomes the baseline, because it's going to learn that that's what it needs to be doing. The developing brain learns by experience to be a little bit more brainstem dominant. And it's a tipping of the scales. So like I said, when the cortex is regulating the filter, you're able to focus in, you can filter out irrelevant things, but if that filter is unchecked because we spent so much time in that state, your focus is limited, you have heightened senses, reactivity, fear, anxiety, you're almost in self-preservation mode. And when we see children in that state, new learning is not happening. So it's a tipping of the scales. I think of that process, and then I think of, well, what does that mean to be a little bit more in the brainstem mode? Fractured focus, hyperactivity, things that, get our attention quickly, so instant gratification, being emotionally dysregulated, having some sensory seeking or avoidant behaviors, and all of these things make me think of my patients that I'm seeing on the day-to-day. That sounds a lot like ADHD. That sounds a lot like anxiety. It sounds a lot like something that would be there in a child who has a communication impairment. Is there a relationship? I wonder. This is the stuff that kind of keeps me up at night. So what can we do about it? I often talk to my kids about being in the driver's seat. I tell them if we're in brainstem mode, it's like you're in the trunk of your own car. So let's get back in the driver's seat. You can be in charge of this. So we'll talk about reducing use, right? I think that's a main goal for all of us. That's why we're all here. Instead of using the screens and the technology to activate the cortex in different ways, multisensory ways, and then do what our parents told us to do. Go outside, diversify their extracurricular activities, sports, martial arts, learning an instrument, read, practice mindfulness, meditation, build a community, be of service to others. Okay, sure, no problem, right? That's like not something that happens. I mentioned this, and even as I'm saying this, I'm a mom. I say this, I hear myself saying it, and I'm also seeing the parents' faces, like, you told us you had kids, like, how do you think that that's actually gonna be helpful? So we need to give ourselves a little bit of grace as parents. Going back to the point that this is not anyone's fault, it's not our fault. Much of this is by design, and for us to remember to respect our humanity, how we develop, how we function, and to think of 3 things that might be helpful: to wean, to wait, and to activate. And that's what I want to talk about next. Wean. So this is something that we can do as a family. We can model the behaviors. For our little kids, how did Gracie know to just sit on that thing and scroll on a thing that has no screen? Don't just sit on the couch and do it if your kids are around, right? Don't take it to the bathroom. That's a behavior that we modeled, like our kids learned to do that from watching us, right? And before bed, right? Not ideal. That being said, sometimes you have to. Sometimes you have to use your phone. I recommend naming the behavior. So I will say, Grace, I'm just using this, but this is for work. Or, you know what, sweetie, I am just ordering groceries. So that's all I'm doing. I'm just sending a thank you message to Mom and Ninima, grandmas. Another thing that can be helpful is to give your device a home. One thing I realized I did once was I was cooking and my phone was next to me. Then I went to go do the dishes and I brought my phone with me. Even if it rang, I wouldn't have picked it up because my hands are wet. So what was I doing there? Subconscious process, wasn't thinking that through at all, but it just happened. So I come home, and I try to put it in one place. I'm on call for myself all the time, so I just turn up the volume in a space that's kind of central to the house so I can hear it, and I go to it as I need it. I'm saying this and sharing this with you guys, but these are the conversations I'm having with all of my patients, right? I'm telling them, when you get home from school, plug it in somewhere. Meaningful use, not reflexive use. And weaning is not easy. We use the word addiction a few times, right? So the best way to make a change in weaning is to first just track use. How many hours a day? 3.5? Okay, just track. That first week, is it 3? Is it actually 2? And then the next week, if it was 3, then it's gonna be 2 hours and 45 minutes. And then the next week, it's gonna be 2.5 hours. Because just taking it away cold turkey doesn't help. I wanted to talk about this. Another way to cut back is to focus on the timing of using the device, especially for kids. I recommend no screens first thing in the morning and no screens in that last hour before bed. I have a little graph here of our circadian rhythm. We have naturally a cortisol peak once every 24 hours. That's where we are, that's our signal to wake up and be active, stimulated by natural light. And once every 24 hours, we have a melatonin peak. That's where we're rested or falling into sleep, and that is stimulated by darkness. So that, recommendation of no phone in that last hour before bed, even if you're taking a melatonin supplement but looking at your phone, it's not gonna work. It's gonna cancel out. Your own brain is releasing its melatonin because it's sensing darkness, so no device at night. Wait. I think a lot of you have heard about this. It's been in a lot of the Friday folders and the newsletters to wait until 8th. This is a movement that promotes collective action, and just no need for a device until 8th grade. And I think the good news is we've got a lot of families. I just got an email from a mom that said that at Cedar Hill there's at least 10 families that have signed the pledge, and at Oak Street in 5th grade alone, 19 families that have signed the pledge. The biggest challenge is, okay, fine, Dr. Sinha, we'll take the phone away, we'll do this, but then he's gonna be isolated. All of his friends have his device. All of her friends are on Snapchat. Well, we can try to get ahead of that and make a decision as a community. And another sort of, to your point about an advantage that we have for children who are younger to do something like this. Use other tech, and I think as Ms. Foley mentioned, there's another talk that we can reference that goes into this in a lot more detail. But use watches, use flip phones, they do exist. And educate, just being here, being a part of this conversation, part of the whole Restoring Focus Collaborative, talking about phone-free schools. I was really honored to have the opportunity to share a lot of this with the teachers, and we talked about how can we optimize presenting some of the content in the classroom, given that attention is fractured for kids these days. And we talked about brain breaks and what are things we can do to help kids reset in the classroom. My passion also is to just share this message about how the brain develops and how it's affected, and I would like to be able to share that with kids directly. I've been trying with Grace. I might have been a little too harsh. I've basically told her, screens will shrink your brain. And so now she is on her little brother's case all the time, like, don't do that, it's gonna shrink your brain. But in a way that's bite-sized for kids to understand, to learn that, yeah, I'm in a very critical period of my life, and I wanna set myself up for success so I can learn to stop. To activate, so now how can we take advantage of the cortex, help it mature, help it develop, help it refine that filter a little bit more. You may have heard of the Let Grow movement, and I took a screenshot of this. It's all about promoting free and unstructured play in our communities. I think the biggest drawback as parents that we have with this is we worry about the safety and we worry about the supervision. But in the absence of that, there is a lot of growth, a lot of risk-taking that kids do, that we all did when we were younger. There's just a suggestion on their website to just keep, just pick a time with your neighbors. Pick a time, Friday afternoons, keep it open, free play, open up your yard, your neighbor's yard, or, at the elementary school, at the park, and just let them go out, let them play. I talked about other examples of this earlier, but reading every day. I encourage all of my kids, ADHD diagnosis or not, dyslexia diagnosis or not, read every day. Read something you're interested in and do that before bed instead of looking at your phone. Dim the lights a little bit, wind down. Extracurriculars we talked about. Oh, I actually wanted to go back. Family suggested, when I saw them at follow-up, they're like, not only did we read every night, but we picked the same book and we did it as a family. And it helped because their kids were struggling a little bit with comprehension. So they just picked a book that they were all into, and then just at random times in their day-to-day, they would, oh, what do you think about that part and this and that? And just felt more engaged with each other. Extracurriculars, of course, to diversify and spend time, but within reason, can't overschedule our kids either. I would love to promote volunteering and service and building community. I think that's a huge way to get our kids involved and spend some of that time. I wanted to talk about mindfulness and meditation a little bit more. This is an image of a functional MRI. It's basically imaging that looks at how the brain is using energy during that time. And so this is a picture of many parts of the brain that are active for this person as this image was taken. But they are at rest. They're just sitting there awake, eyes closed. So the brain is just as active during that process as it is doing a cognitive task, like a math problem or reading something. Mindfulness, meditation, yes, there's a lot of apps and ways and things to do and focus on this or listen to this music or this guided thing or that. But just sitting awake, eyes closed, 5 seconds today, 10 seconds tomorrow, building on that, you're actually promoting more of that cortex development, cortical development, and helping that brain develop and narrow down that filter. So this is I think the neurology or the neural basis of meditation, which is just that the brain is just as active during that time. And so even if we can't diversify and sign up for football and guitar and things, but if before bed we could just sit for a few seconds, awake, eyes closed, it goes a long way because it builds a practice over time. And the last thing that I wanted to talk about is boredom, because that's a huge part of why the screens have become so easy for us as parents to be like, okay, well, yeah, this would occupy you, and then we don't have to kind of figure out how to deal with all this frustration. Going back to the free and unstructured play, I think one thing we've learned from this experience, decades-long experience, is that kids aren't bored anymore because they don't have to be, and that there's actually a loss that we've experienced as a result of that. So let's be bored, let's kind of power through it, because if you power through the frustration of it and figure out the thing to do, that helps coping. That helps develop coping skills, and that helps you even further with emotional regulation and maturity and things like that. So even though I said to do like a bajillion different things, it's also okay to do absolutely none of those and spend some time being bored. So kind of going back to, the things I see at work, the different diagnoses, screens may not have caused that, but from what I see on the day-to-day, they are making symptoms worse. They're certainly obstructing the healing process. But I think there's a lot that we can do about that. Some take-home messages to just reiterate what I've been talking about. Brain development is experience dependent. Our kids in elementary school are in a very critical period. to try to think about the brain as like these two processes, one where there's a filter that's open and unchecked, and then the cortex that helps regulate it. And to understand that possibly the reason that screens have been so harmful is that they're preventing the developing brain from maturing its own process of developing attention and focus. Give ourselves some grace. It's an uphill battle to make these changes, but it's totally worth it. And to try to think of different ways that we can wean, we can wait, and we can sort of activate our kids' developing brains. That's all. Thank you.
Thank you, Doc. Anyone have any questions for her while we have time? We're a little early. Any brave souls want to raise their hands? All right. Thank you.
Thank you, guys.
Thank you all for coming out. Again, just really quick, I love the practice makes permanent. It's one of the things we talk about regularly. Look at your kids. Look at your kids when they're playing with blocks or with board games or with other kids playing tag or they're on the piano or even while they're reading a book. And then look at your kids or other people's kids when they're on the phone. And you tell me if you don't see a difference. And that's literally what we see in school. The kids here are fantastic. I love talking to them constantly. I talk to them about, they're in so many activities. We have so many activities here at Ridge High School, more than I ever had at my high school. Every sport imaginable, our forensics team is through there. But when I talk to them about after school, and we have Cinderella coming, and I talk to kids in the play, they don't have their phones for hours at a time. Hours at a time. And they don't even think about it. So I keep asking them, why do you need your phones during school? And we had all sorts of interesting answers then. None of them, though, as they're coming out, I love our kids, because as the answers are coming out of their mouth, because it comes out quickly, they know right away, that doesn't sound good. I'm bored at school. I don't care about school. I'm not as focused at school. Do I need to be focused at school? But you look at the activities that they're truly engaged in, and you can see a whole different human than when they have their devices. And so what we've realized here at the school alone is that we're not doing our students a service if we're trying to develop them as academics, if they're constantly distracted. You know, and they know it and they feel it. And so it's, we had a wonderful book talking about this experience, and the author was promoting being engaged in life. You have to be looking up to be engaged in life. You can't be looking down. And what he says in this line, I absolutely love, but the internet and cell phones, he says, sell a life of distraction. And when we're distracted, we're not engaged, so much so that when we're distracted, we're not invested in what we're doing. We're actually bored just at a more frenetic pace. And if you watch people scroll through or pick up their phones for one thing, which I loved, you said label what you're doing. My problem is I'm picking up my phone to send one email. Oh, I checked 2 text messages, and as soon as the phone has you, it tries to tell you to do 9 other things. And you watch the kids do that. Half the time they put the phone down, never having done the one thing that they picked up the phone to do. And again, it's built to do that. This idea that we're not really engaged in what we're looking at, we just keep scrolling. And you have the opportunity to work with your children and try and avoid that from happening. And I love the very simple things that you laid out for everyone. So thank you for that. As I mentioned, this will be recorded. I do encourage the idea of wait till 8th and the rest. It takes community action. It can sometimes feel like you're pushing against the ocean if you're doing things by yourself with your kids in your house. But we're trying to have this conversation as a community, and you can have it as smaller communities within our community. If your child plays piano with 6 other kids and the teacher, there's a community that the kids hang out with. If they're on the lacrosse team, you know, if they have a reading club, if they're playing tag on the street, whatever it is, you're talking to those parents and you form those small bubbles of community, which we try to do at the elementary schools as well. But if you create this web right here in Basking Ridge of all the different ways our kids are interconnected, you can pull in an extra parent here, an extra parent there. Now we're all pushing against the ocean together. And maybe collectively we have a shot. And so thank you all for coming out here. I hope this was informative. Doctor, I really appreciate that you're here as well. Ms. Foley, thank you again. And hopefully we'll see you at more of these events. And as you're asking questions and being involved, we really can make a change K-12. All right? Yeah. If you send it to me, I'll put it up on the Restoring Focus website so people can access it that way as well. And that's fantastic. But it takes some engaged people just to make other people aware, and we build a movement. And again, phones aren't going anywhere, and the tools that they help us access really are tremendous. They get better every day, but we see what they're doing to our brains, our children's brains. That's amazing that you've done that. Thank you. But if you send me the contact information, I'd love to put it out there for folks. Yeah.
Can you just say it into the microphone, because I know with the recording, they don't always catch.
Do you want to come up here and really quickly?
So that way the people.
I wouldn't do it justice. Absolutely. We're going to add some subtitles to the video.
Hi, again, I'm Lauren Becht, and I created the Wait Until 8th Instagram account, and the handle is at waituntil8th_Basking Ridge. And there you can find a link to how to sign the pledge. And right now we have active pledges in 5th grade in both Oak Street and Cedar Hill, and then we also have an active pledge in 3rd grade at Cedar Hill. And what that means is there's at least 10 families who've signed up to wait to give a phone to their child until the end of 8th grade. So if you could go there and follow us, and any support would be great. Thank you so much.
Thank you. That's fantastic. And it takes little things like that to start and they become huge. So thank you. Hopefully we can help each other as we go through this. And as a school district, we look at it as one of our major roles to engage the community in these kinds of conversations so that we're all learning together. Thank you. That's amazing that you did that. And hopefully from this, we'll get more people signed up. And again, if that's it, thank you all for coming out. We hope to see you again soon. And have a great evening.